Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Not a Historian. Today we'll be going over the period of imperialism and colonialism between 1815 and World War II. This is what historians refer to as the new imperialism. The old imperialism being the period from 1492, when Columbus quote unquote discovered the New World, and about 1770, when the 13 colonies started making trouble with the United Kingdom. Now, to do this, we'll be looking at various maps that I made using historicalmapchart.net, link in the description below, to observe the rises and falls of various empires during the new imperialism period. So let's get started. Here we have a map of the world in 1815. Oh, and by the way, there may be some errors with these maps. I might have colored something that shouldn't have been colored, or I might have left blank something that should have been colored. So if you find any mistakes, put them in the comment section below. Anyway, let's get started in 1815. We'll start our tour here in Europe. Let's look at France first. About 20 years before 1815, in the 1790s, France had gone through a tumultuous revolution in which the monarchy was overthrown and the people rose up and replaced it with a republican government. There was immense violence and bloodshed and ruthless crackdowns on the government's opponents. Also, everybody else in Europe ganged up on France to prevent the spread of republicanism to the surrounding monarchies. But eventually, this guy called Napoleon Bonaparte came in. He took control of France and started invading everybody else. The Netherlands here fell, Prussia fell, Austria was pretty much knocked out. The Holy Roman Empire was dissolved. He took much of northern Italy. He occupied Spain and Portugal. And the point where he occupies Spain and Portugal, that's one of the main turning points. He gets bogged down with the militias that are fighting against the French. And eventually the British come in, land at Portugal, and help kick the French out. Now, second big mistake is invading Russia. Now, this is a terrible, terrible decision. Everybody knows, every good strategist knows, not to invade Russia. This is a terrible decision, and you really shouldn't do it for obvious reasons. But even though they're obvious, I will mention them anyway. 1, Russia is big. 2, when it rains, it gets really muddy. 3, it gets really, really cold in the winter. 4, Russian leaders really like to use scorched earth tactics. So, yeah. So he invades Russia, runs out of supplies, and he has to march back to France. Now the French army is severely weakened by this disastrous Russian campaign. Seeing the weakness, everybody else in Europe gangs up on France for apparently the 6th time. Wow, okay. The 6th time. Defeats Napoleon and sends him off to Elba. But then the reinstated monarchy is super unpopular, so he comes back, takes control for 100 days, and then is smashed at Waterloo here. And goes into exile way, way down about here, somewhere. Now let's look at Britain. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland has just come out victorious against France. In the meantime, it is in the middle of what we call the Industrial Revolution, in which the economy is transformed from an agrarian, farming-based economy into an industrial, manufacturing-based economy. So first come the innovations in the cotton textile industry and steam power, which leads to more efficient production and less work on the part of the manufacturers themselves. Second, we have coal mining innovations. So they start burning coal as a power source, and this helps power the factory machinery, and again allows for more efficient production. Next, we have iron innovations. Europeans figured out how to smelt iron effectively and make wrought iron and steel, and this creates a stronger building material that they can use to make stronger and more stable buildings. And this innovation drives the British economy. And finally, we have the development of railways across the United Kingdom. which helps people get to where they want faster than ever before. This creates a boom in the British economy. It causes people to move to cities and work in the factories and increase production. And this gives the United Kingdom the resources and the industrial capacity it needs to go on a world-conquering spree and become one of the most powerful empires ever in the history of the world. Over here we have Denmark, which controls Iceland, Greenland, and you can't see it, but there's the Faroe Islands in here. The aforementioned Prussians, which, along with Britain, defeated the French at Waterloo, and has gained some new territory here and some new power. Power it will use in an effective way later. The Kingdom of Sardinia here, not very important at the moment, but it will be soon. We have the Ottoman Empire, the so-called sick man of Europe. It controls what is now Turkey, Mesopotamia, the Levant, the Hejaz, Egypt, even down to Yemen, Eritrea, and Algeria. Pretty big empire. But the people who run the empire aren't the best administrators or governors or whatever. They aren't the best rulers. And this will be pretty relevant as time goes on. And then we have the Russian Empire that Napoleon tried to invade. A couple hundred years ago, it had just expanded into Siberia. And under Peter the Great, into Finland and the Baltic states. And under Catherine the Great, down to the Black Sea and the Caucasus and Poland. Let's move over to Asia now. So over in Asia, we have the Great Qing Dynasty of China, which is at the very beginning of its decline. Japan was ruled by the Tokugawa shogunate. You have British India starting to take shape, administrated by the British East India Company. The Dutch in the Dutch East Indies, extracting the profit from the Spice Islands here and fueling the spice trade. And the Spanish Philippines. Over in Africa, we have the first bits and parts of European colonies. You have French Senegal, got Portuguese holdings here, here, and here, and here. British possessions here in Sierra Leone and here in South Africa, which it had just taken from the Dutch. And Spanish Bioko. Okay, over here in the Americas, the emergent power here is the United States of America. Now, in the 1770s, the United States had fought a war of independence with Great Britain. It had won, it was newly independent, it wrote up a constitution, and it started cementing itself as a regional power. And it proved itself that it was strong, it was stable, by going to war against the United Kingdom and fighting them to a standstill from 1812 to 1815. Now this territory here, it was called the Old Northwest, or the Northwest Territory. Now back in the day, it was home to many Indian tribes. The United States annexed it in 1783 as part of the peace negotiations with the United Kingdom and started pushing the Native Americans off their land. Now, understandably, the Native Americans didn't like it, and they went to war with the United States. They formed into confederacies, the most famous ones being the Northwestern Confederacy and Tecumseh's Confederacy. And even though these confederacies were pretty formidable, they were defeated time and again by the Americans. And so slowly, like that, they were forced off their land into reservations. The same thing happened down here in the South. Here there was a group of Indians called the Creeks, and at this point in 1815 the United States was fighting with these Creeks in the Creek War. Now here we have Russian Alaska, British Canada, and down here we have the Spanish Empire. Now the Spanish Empire wasn't that strong of an empire anymore due to its beating up by Napoleon and the people starting to not want to be part of Spain anymore. The colonies had grown up. They wanted to be their own countries. So what's happening now is here, these Spanish possessions were now declaring themselves independent, establishing their own governments, and trying to rule themselves like the United States. Now, at first, this is not going to work very nicely, but as time goes on, things are going to even out. Here you'll notice that there's a random blank spot on the western half of this island called Hispaniola. This blank spot is the former French colony of Haiti. Now, back in the 1790s, 1800s, the people of Haiti, who had been brutally oppressed chattel slaves working on the sugar plantations, rose up against their masters, and they declared themselves a republic. The first black republic in history. Now, no matter how glorious this could have been, things in Haiti aren't looking too good. They got a line of successive dictators, and there's even been an emperor. Haiti is going poor. The revolution damaged all of its infrastructure and its economic source, really. So, yeah, not doing too hot. Got British Jamaica, British Honduras, the Mosquito Coast, British Guyana, and Portuguese Brazil. Now, again, we go back to Napoleon. Now, when Napoleon occupied Portugal, the Portuguese royal family fled to their possessions in Brazil in 1807. And eventually, this is going to be one of the first steps, one of the first dominoes that leads to Brazilian independence. See, when the rest of the royal family leaves, one of them, a prince named Pedro, decides to stay. And eventually, in 1822, he makes himself the king of Brazil and declares independence from Portugal. And that is why people in Brazil speak Portuguese and not Spanish. Alright, that's all the time we have for today. So make sure to keep an eye out for the next video in the series. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my new videos. And leave a comment. What did I leave out? What mistakes did I make? I'm not a historian, so feel free to criticize me for anything I did wrong. And I'll see you next time.